A veteran left in the snow, a single biker sees him. What happens next triggers a massive, dangerous response and unearths a secret that powerful people buried. This is a story of ultimate protection, hidden truths, and an empire that doesn't play by the rules. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The snow was coming down hard now, thick white flakes that stuck to Daniel's old army jacket. He leaned against the cold metal door of the VA clinic, but it was locked. A piece of paper taped to the glass read, "Closed for Christmas Eve." He let out a shaky breath. The pain in his leg, the old wound from the desert, was a white-hot fire. He slid down the door, sitting in the growing drift. In his hands, he held the only thing that mattered anymore, a folded American flag, triangle tight. He held it to his chest as the world began to blur and go quiet. Across the street, the neon sign of a dive bar flickered. Inside, a man named Mark was finishing a beer. He was big, with a leather vest that had a winged skull patch on the back. He was the president of the local Hells Angels chapter. He looked out the window, wiping condensation away. He saw a dark shape slumped against the clinic door. "Damn," he muttered. He thought it was just some drunk. But then the streetlight caught the edge of the flag in Daniel's hands. Mark's own time in the Marines, a lifetime ago, sparked in his gut. This wasn't a drunk. He threw on his coat and walked out, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. He knelt beside Daniel. The man was young, but his face was old with pain. His skin was too pale. "Hey, brother," Mark said, his voice rough. "You with me?" Daniel's eyes fluttered open, full of confusion and pride. "Clinic's closed," Daniel whispered. Mark saw the flag. He knew what that meant. "You didn't just carry one of those around." "Yeah, it is," Mark said. He pulled out his phone, not to call 911, but to call his sergeant at arms, a giant man named James. "Jimmy, I'm at the old VA on 5th. I got a situation. A vet's down, freezing. Get the boys, get all the boys, and call Mercy. Tell her to get her nurse kit and get here now." He didn't wait for an answer. He shrugged out of his own heavy leather coat and wrapped it around Daniel. "Stay with me, man. Cavalry's coming." It started with a rumble. One bike, then 5, then 20. They rolled in from every direction, headlights cutting through the snowstorm, big men and tough women in leather and denim, their patches declaring their loyalty. They didn't ask questions. Mark pointed and they moved. 2 bikers ran to the clinic door and with a powerful heave, broke the lock open. "We're opening early," one grunted. They brought space heaters from their garages, generators that roared to life, plugging in strings of Christmas lights that they hung from the clinic's awning, turning the frozen parking lot into a sudden, bright oasis. A woman named Mercy, who had a nurse's heart and a biker's soul, arrived in a pickup truck. She pushed through the crowd, kneeling in the snow next to Mark. "Move, boss, let me work." She checked Daniel's pulse, his pupils. "Hypothermia, shock, that leg's bad." "Get him inside, on a table now." 4 bikers became a gentle stretcher, carrying Daniel into the now-warm clinic. They cleared an examination room, sweeping supplies onto the floor with a clatter. Mercy started an IV from a kit she always kept. "He needs a hospital, Mark," she said, not looking up. "Ambulance'll take 40 minutes in this," James said, looking at his phone. "The roads are junk." Mark looked at Daniel's still form, the flag now resting on a chair beside him. "Then we make him a hospital." He turned to the room full of his brothers. "You heard her. We need more. Call every charter, anyone within 2 hours. Tell them a soldier needs us." The call went out. It wasn't a club order, it was a request, and it was answered. Bikes came from neighboring towns, then neighboring states. They filled the parking lot, a sea of chrome and leather under the Christmas lights. News vans showed up but stayed behind a line of quiet, firm bikers. The police came too, but one look at the organized chaos, bikers directing traffic, running supplies, brewing coffee on portable stoves, and the sergeant just nodded. "Let us know if you need the road cleared for an ambulance," he said. Inside, Daniel drifted in and out. He saw shapes, heard deep voices that should have been scary but felt safe. "Hang on, kid," someone said. A big man with tattoos on his knuckles was carefully adjusting his blanket. It was confusing. Mercy worked through the night. She had antibiotics, pain meds. She stabilized him. The color slowly returned to his face. Near midnight, he was awake, propped up on pillows, sipping broth from a thermos cup held by a biker named Paul, who had a beard down to his chest. "Easy there, soldier," Paul said, his voice surprisingly soft. "Who are you people?" Daniel asked, his voice scratchy. "We're the neighborhood watch," Mark said, walking in. He pulled up a stool. "You feeling alive enough to tell me why you were out there with that?" He pointed to the flag. Daniel's eyes clouded. "It's my father's. He died in the service. They gave it to me last week." "Sorry for your loss," Mark said, and he meant it. "Which service?" "Army, like me. He was listed MIA decades ago. They just found his remains. They gave me the flag at a private ceremony. No notice, no honors, just a man in a suit who handed it to me and told me not to talk about it." Daniel's hand tightened on the blanket. "It didn't feel right. My dad was a hero. He deserved more. I was coming here to see if anyone had records, to find someone who knew his unit." Mark and Mercy exchanged a look. A secret burial, a hush order that stank of something bigger. "What was your dad's name, Daniel?" Mercy asked. David Carter." Mark's blood went cold. He knew that name, not from the military, from his own darker business. David Carter was a name that had come up in whispers, a ghost from a deal gone wrong years ago involving crooked government contractors. A man who had seen something he shouldn't have. Just then James came in, his face grim. He pulled Mark aside, but Daniel could hear him. "Boss, we got company, black SUVs, 3 of them, government plates, men in cheap suits getting out. They're asking for him." He nodded at Daniel. The cozy, protective feeling in the clinic vanished, replaced by a sharp tension. Mark's friendly face hardened into something dangerous. This was his world now. "They don't get in," he said, his voice low and final. "Not tonight, not ever unless he says so." He walked to the window. Outside, the scene was surreal. 375 Hell's Angels stood, talked, drank coffee in the snowy lot. And at the gate, blocked by a wall of leather, stood 3 nervous-looking men in overcoats. Mark turned to Daniel. "Those men out there, the suit and tie guys, you want to talk to them?" Daniel looked at the flag. He looked at the crowd of bikers who had saved him. He saw Mercy's protective stance, James's clenched fists. He saw Mark's eyes, which promised both sanctuary and violence. "No," Daniel said, strength coming back into his voice. "I don't." A slow, fierce smile spread across Mark's face. "Good answer." He looked at James. "Tell our guests the patient is resting, and tell them the visiting hours are over." James nodded and walked out, cracking his knuckles. The door shut behind him. Daniel stared at Mark. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me." Mark picked up the folded flag. He held it with a respect that surprised Daniel. "This isn't about knowing you, it's about what this means. He jerked his head toward the window, think they can bury the truth with good men. They think no one will notice. They forgot about us." He put the flag back gently. "We notice." Outside, one of the suits tried to push forward. "We have federal authority. We need to debrief Mr. Carter." A biker, a huge man named Tiny, who was actually 7 feet tall, simply shifted his weight. He didn't speak. He just stared. The suit stepped back. The night wore on. The bikers maintained their vigil. Daniel slept. Mercy watched his monitors. Mark sat in a chair by the door, a sentinel. He was thinking about the name David Carter and about the weapons shipment his club had intercepted years back. Shipments that were supposed to go to allies but were being rerouted to enemy militias. A whistleblower had died to stop it. He was starting to think that whistleblower was David Carter. Daniel woke with a start in the early morning hours, Christmas Day. The pain was less. He saw Mark asleep in the chair, his head tilted back. He saw Mercy dozing on another chair. He saw the flag, and he made a decision. He slowly, carefully unfolded the flag. Between the folds, where the stars would be, was not just fabric. There was a small, sealed plastic sleeve taped there. Inside, it was a microSD card. His father's last letter had been cryptic. "The truth is in the stars, son." He thought it was poetry. Now he understood. His movement woke Mark, whose eyes snapped open instantly. "What is it?" Daniel held up the tiny card. "I think this is what they want, what my father died for." Mark took it. He pulled a laptop from a bag. He slid the card in. Files opened, documents, shipment manifests, videos from a helmet cam showing deliberate mislabeling of crates, names, government-approved contractors, high-ranking names. It was a blueprint of treason. "Holy hell," Mark whispered. He looked at Daniel. "Your dad, he was a saint." "He was a soldier," Daniel corrected, tears in his eyes. "And they killed him for it." Mercy was awake now, looking at the screen. "This is a death sentence, if they know you have this." Mark leaned back, a king in his makeshift throne. He looked out the window at his empire, 375 soldiers of a different kind. They had businesses, they had rules, they lived outside the law. But this was a line. This was their country too. "They won't touch him," Mark said finally. "He's under our protection now, our full protection." He looked at Daniel. "That means you get a new name, a new life, far from here, or you can stay. And we use this," he pointed at the screen, "to burn their house down. It's your call, it's your truth." Daniel thought of his father, alone and betrayed. He thought of the cold door, the snow. Then he thought of the rumble of bikes, the Christmas lights in a storm, the coat wrapped around him. "I'm tired of running," he said. "They took my dad. They tried to take me. I want to fight." Mark's smile returned, colder this time, a business smile. "Then welcome to the family, brother," he called James in. "Make copies, many copies. Send one to every major news network, but use a secure drop. Send one to that senator who hates us. He's clean, he'll use it. The original stays with us, our insurance." The next few days were a blur. Daniel was moved from the clinic to a safe house, an old roadhouse bar owned by the club. It was there he met Rita, Mark's sister. She ran the books for the club's legitimate businesses. She was sharp, beautiful, and had no patience for nonsense. She brought Daniel his meals, changed his bandages when Mercy wasn't around. "So you're the troublemaker," she said on the third day, putting a plate of eggs down hard. "I try not to be," Daniel said. "Try harder next time," she shot back, but she smiled. There was a spark there, a charge. She saw the soldier in him, not the victim. He saw the strength in her, not the biker's mole. One evening, as snow fell again outside the roadhouse window, they talked, really talked, about loss, about family, about wanting something real in a world full of lies. Their hands brushed on the table, and neither pulled away. The air between them crackled, a promise of heat in the middle of all the danger. It was a connection, fast and deep, born from the ashes of a Christmas Eve rescue. Weeks passed. The story, fueled by the leaked documents, exploded. The news called it a Christmas miracle expose. The suits who came to the clinic were arrested. Higher-ups were investigated. David Carter's name was cleared, with full military honors announced. The club didn't give up their empire. They went back to work, but Daniel stayed. He healed. He learned. He found a place among them, using his army logistics training to help Rita with the legitimate side of things. He and Rita grew closer, their chemistry a quiet, burning constant. There were light moments too. Daniel trying to learn to ride a bike and stalling it repeatedly in the parking lot, the big bikers laughing until they cried. A Christmas dinner in January to make up for the one they all missed, with James wearing a ridiculous reindeer apron. But the threat wasn't gone. The powerful people who were exposed still had friends. One night, a car slowed down outside the roadhouse. A shot rang out, shattering the window above Daniel's head. The club went on high alert. This was an act of war. Mark gathered his leaders. "They hit our home, they hit our brother, this ends now." It was no longer about protecting one man, it was about defending their whole world. Daniel stood with them. He put on a leather cut, without a patch, but with their blessing. He was one of them now. Rita kissed him before he left, a kiss full of fear and fire. "You come back to me," she whispered. "I will," he promised. Mark's plan wasn't a brawl, it was a masterstroke. Using the remaining data from the flash drive, they targeted the exposed men where it hurt, their money. They flooded the dark web with proof of their offshore accounts, their shell companies. They sent tailored packets to their wives, their mistresses. They created chaos in the enemy's ranks, turning them against each other. The final confrontation happened not in a dark alley, but in a polished corporate lobby. Mark, James, and Daniel walked in, looking utterly out of place. They were taken to a sleek office where a man named Sterling, the ringleader behind the contracts, sat behind $1 million desk. "You have no idea what you're playing with," Sterling hissed. Mark just leaned forward, placing a single USB drive on the desk. On that drive is a copy of everything, and instructions to send it to every agency on the planet if any of us, or our businesses, have so much as a parking ticket we don't deserve. If Daniel here gets a hangnail, it goes out. You're done, you stay in your cage, and we stay in ours. This is the new border. Sterling's face was purple with rage, but he saw the truth in Mark's eyes. This wasn't a bluff. It was a mutually assured destruction packed from the underworld. They walked out, the eyes of the corporate world on them. Outside, the rumble of dozens of bikes waited. They rode back to the roadhouse, a rolling declaration of victory. That night they had a party. The music was loud. Daniel stood on the porch, looking out at the family he'd found. Rita came out, slipping her arm around his waist. "You okay, soldier?" He looked at her, then back at the crowd. He saw Mark laughing with Mercy. He saw James arm wrestling Tiny. He saw the folded flag, now framed behind the bar. "Yeah," he said, pulling her close, "I'm home." The story spread, becoming legend. The veteran left in the snow. The 375 angels who answered. The secret in the stars. They didn't become heroes in the eyes of the law, but in their world and in Daniel's heart, they were something better. They were family, and they had, against all odds, saved Christmas and a whole lot more. The peace after the showdown with Sterling felt earned, but in their world it was always thin. Daniel settled into the rhythm of the roadhouse and the club. His leg healed, leaving only a faint ache in the cold, a reminder of the snow and the salvation. Rita was the best kind of medicine, her no-nonsense care hiding a deep, fierce love that had grown between them. They were a pair, the soldier and the bookkeeper, finding something real in the chaos. One afternoon, Daniel was in the back office helping Rita sort invoices. The sun streamed through the window, catching the dust in the air. He reached for a folder at the same time she did, their fingers tangling. He didn't let go. He turned her hand over, tracing a line on her palm. She looked up, her tough girl mask softening. "You're a distraction, Carter," she said, but she didn't pull away. "Good," he said and leaned in. The kiss was slow and deep, a world of promise in it. It was the kind of moment that made you forget about guns and threats and government conspiracies. It was just them. The door banged open. James stood there, not even bothering to look embarrassed. "Boss wants you both, out front, now." The moment shattered. They followed him, the charged air between them shifting back into one of alertness. In the main bar, Mark was standing over a laptop, his face like thunder. Mercy was beside him, pointing at the screen. A local news site was showing a grainy security camera still. It showed a man, face shadowed by a hoodie, placing a package under a car Daniel sometimes used. The headline read, "Attempted bombing linked to biker bar." "That's not one of Sterling's guys," Mark growled. "Too sloppy. This is a message or a gift." "A gift?" Daniel asked, the cold from Christmas Eve seeping back into his bones. "From our competition," James clarified, crossing his massive arms. "The Iron Sinners, they run the south side. They've been wanting a piece of our distribution lanes for years. They see this news story about us, they think we're distracted or weak. This," he jabbed a finger at the screen, "is them saying hello." The club's legitimate businesses were one thing: bars. Garage, a towing company. Their other ventures, the ones that paid for the Christmas lights and the generators and the lawyers, were built on territory and respect. An attack like this was a direct challenge. "We can't let this slide," a biker named Paul said from the corner, his voice quiet but hard. "We won't," Mark said. He looked at Daniel. "This involves you. That was your car. You're a target twice over now. You stay close. Rita, you're with him. No arguments." Rita just nodded, her hand finding Daniel's and squeezing tight. The romance of 5 minutes ago was gone, replaced by the old, familiar tension. The club went to work. It wasn't about calling the cops. It was about sending a message back. That night, a convoy of bikes rode to the south side, to a strip club owned by the Iron Sinners president, a mean piece of work named Vince. They didn't go in guns blazing. That was for movies. They parked their bikes in a perfect, intimidating line across the entire parking lot, blocking every space. Then they just sat there, idling, a wall of noise and steel. Vince came out, a thin, wiry man with snake tattoos on his neck. "Mark, this is a surprise, you lost." "Just admiring the view, Vince," Mark called back, his voice casual over the rumble. "Heard you've been doing some freelance deliveries in my neighborhood. I'm here to tell you to stop. My guys get nervous, and when they get nervous, they forget where the line is." Vince's smile was all teeth. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe your new charity case brought his own troubles. You're running a halfway house now, I hear." Daniel felt every muscle tense. Rita's grip on his waist tightened. Mark just revved his engine once, a sharp, loud bark. "The next package that shows up where it shouldn't," he said, his voice dropping all pretense of friendliness, "won't be under a car, it'll be on your doorstep, and I won't be idling in the lot. We clear." The two men stared at each other, the air between them crackling with hatred. Finally, Vince gave a tiny shrug. "Crystal." The angels left, the message delivered. But on the ride back, Daniel knew it wasn't over. Vince's pride was wounded. He'd have to answer. Life at the roadhouse became a fortress. Bikers took shifts on watch. Daniel felt both protected and caged. His budding relationship with Rita was conducted in glances and brief touches between security briefings. One evening, as she was closing the safe in the office, he came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "This is crazy," he murmured into her hair. She leaned back into him. "This is our life, you signed up for it." "I signed up for you," he corrected, turning her to face him. This kiss was different, not just a spark, but a claiming. It was full of all the fear and adrenaline and hope of the past weeks. It was hot and deep, and for a few minutes, the outside world ceased to exist. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily. "I'm not going anywhere, Rita," he promised, his voice rough. "You better not," she whispered, her eyes shining. The calm broke a week later. It was a supply run, a simple, legitimate run to a hardware store for the garage. 2 prospects, young men hopping to become full patch members, were sent. Their truck was T-boned at an intersection by a stolen van. It wasn't an accident. The van sped off, leaving the prospects bruised and battered, the truck totaled. The call came into the roadhouse. Mark listened, his face going still. "They hit our kids," he said, hanging up the phone. The room went silent. That's the line. A council was called. The heads of the nearby chapters, the ones who had come on Christmas Eve, gathered in the closed bar. It was a somber meeting. This was business, war business. "We hit them back, hard. We take their biggest revenue stream," one chapter president, a grizzled man named Leo, stated. "The shipment coming in Thursday night at the old dock," James said, spreading a hand-drawn map on the pool table. "Vince's big score, electronics, high value, we intercept it, we take it, we leave a note." Daniel listened, his soldier's mind analyzing the plan. "They'll be expecting a direct attack after the truck. They'll have men there." Mark looked at him. "You have a better idea." Daniel studied the map. "You said it's electronics. They need to move it fast, probably in a specific truck. What if we don't hit the dock? What if we hit the truck 5 miles later on the overpass? 1 car in front, 1 behind, box it in. Less of their men, more surprise. We disable it, transfer the goods to our trucks, and we are gone before backup comes." The room looked at him, then at Mark. A slow grin spread on Mark's face. "I like it, tactical, clean." He clapped Daniel on the shoulder. "You're in, on the ground." Rita's face paled, but she said nothing. She just handed Daniel a black leather jacket later that night, her fingers lingering on the collar. "You come back," was all she said, echoing his own promise. Thursday night was clear and cold. Daniel's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a familiar focus. This was a different desert, a different enemy, but the same Brotherhood at his back. He rode in the lead car with James and 2 other solid members. They were dressed in dark clothes, faces covered. They weren't wearing cuts. This was deniable. The convoy of club trucks and cars moved like a military operation. They had lookouts, scouts, getaway drivers. It was their empire in motion, efficient and deadly. They waited in the shadows of the overpass. Right on time, the target truck appeared, followed by a single chase car. Mark's voice crackled over the secure radio. Now. Daniel's car shot out, cutting off the truck. Another car slid in behind the chase car, bumping it hard towards the railing. Chaos erupted. The truck slammed on its brakes. Men piled out of the chase car, shouting. But the angels were faster. They swarmed the truck. James used a crowbar on the door. Daniel covered him, his eyes scanning the darkness. A man from the chase car lunged forward with a pipe. Daniel disarmed him with a swift, sharp move, putting him on the ground without firing a shot. It was over in 3 minutes. The goods, boxes of high-end smartphones and tablets were transferred. Mark himself stepped up to the dazed truck driver and placed a single patch on the hood of the truck, the winged skull. The note. They vanished into the night, leaving only the stunned iron sinners and their empty truck. Back at the roadhouse, it was a quiet victory. No party. The goods were already being moved through their own channels. The money would be laundered through the legitimate businesses. Daniel sat at the bar, adrenaline still coursing through him. Rita brought him a whiskey, her eyes searching his. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded, taking the drink. It felt familiar, wrong but right for here. She sat beside him, her shoulder touching his. "It's the life. You protect what's yours." Mark joined them, raising his own glass. To the new guy, "He's got a head for this." He drank. "Vince won't take this lying down. He can't. He'll come for us directly now. Probably for you," he said to Daniel. "Or for her," he nodded at Rita. The threat hung in the air. The first move had been made. The second would be worse. They didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, the call came from the garage they owned on the edge of town. It was on fire, not an electrical fire, gasoline and a match. The club roared to the scene, but it was too late. The garage was a loss. It was a solid hit, a real financial blow. Vince was telling them the dock theft wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a war. Standing in the glow of the burning building, the heat washing over them, Mark made a decision. We end it. At the source, we don't wait for the next hit. A plan was formed, the most dangerous one yet. Vince was a creature of habit. Every Friday night, he had a private dinner at a secluded, high-end steakhouse. He went with 2 bodyguards. The steakhouse had a back alley for deliveries. "We take him there. When he's alone walking to his car, we don't kill him," Mark said, his eyes glinting in the firelight. "We break him. We make him understand that his club is finished if he continues. We take him for a ride, have a conversation, and drop him back off. Humiliated, alive but finished." It was a risk. If it went wrong, it was a death sentence for everyone involved. The night of the move, Daniel was suited up again. Rita kissed him at the door, a desperate, fierce kiss. "This is the last one. After this, you're on books duty with me forever," she said, tears in her eyes. "Deal," he said. The steakhouse alley was dark and wet. Daniel, Mark, and James waited in a van with tinted windows. They saw Vince come out, laughing, flanked by his 2 hulking guards. He sent them to get the car. For a moment, he was alone, lighting a cigar. That was the moment. They moved like ghosts, a cloth over the mouth, a quick jab of a sedative. Vince struggled, then went limp. They had him in the van in 7 seconds. The car with the bodyguards pulled up to an empty alley. They drove to an abandoned warehouse the club owned. When Vince woke up, he was tied to a chair, a single light bulb hanging above him. Mark sat opposite him. "You burned my garage, Vince." Vince spat. "You stole from me. You tried to bomb a brother, my brother. You started a war you can't win. Look around." Mark gestured to the shadows. Dozens of angels stood there, silent. "I have 375 men who owe me their lives. How many do you have who will die for you?" Vince's bravado faltered, seeing the army in the darkness. "Hear what's going to happen," Mark continued, his voice calm. "You're going to disband the Iron Sinners. You're going to sell your businesses to me for a fair price. And you're going to move to Florida. You try to fight or you come back, we won't be having a chat. We'll just be visiting your grave. Do you understand the offer?" It was an offer of survival, but not of power. Vince, a proud man, was being broken. He looked from face to face, seeing no bluff. He saw Daniel, the veteran, his eyes cold and steady. He saw James, a mountain of promised violence. He saw Mark, a king in his court. Finally, his shoulders slumped. He nodded. They drove him back, dropping him off a mile from his home. The message was clear: we can get you anytime. The war was over. The Iron Sinners fell apart within weeks. The club absorbed their territory, their businesses. Their empire grew just as they said it would. They didn't give it up, they expanded it. Months later, on a warm summer night, the roadhouse was buzzing with a different energy. It was a party, a real one. Music played. Daniel stood with Rita by his side, laughing at something Paul was saying. He was one of them now, fully. He had his own cut, a simple one that said "Property of Roadhouse Crew," a gift from Rita. He wore it with pride. Mark climbed onto the pool table, whistling for quiet. The room hushed. "We've been through hell," he began, looking around at his family. "We lost a garage. We gained a brother." He nodded to Daniel. "We stood our ground, and we're still here. That's because we remember what matters: family, loyalty, and knowing when to fight for someone in the snow." A cheer went up. Mark jumped down and walked over to Daniel and Rita. He put a hand on each of their shoulders. "Now, I have one more piece of business." He looked between them, a genuine smile on his face. "When? The wedding? This tension is killing everyone." Rita blushed, and Daniel laughed, pulling her closer. "Soon," he said. "We're thinking Christmas Eve." Mark's smile widened. "Perfect." As the party swirled around them, Daniel held Rita close, looking out at the room, at the men and women who were criminals, outlaws, and his saviors. He thought of the flag, now in a place of honor in their new home. He thought of his father. The truth was out. The debt was paid. And in the unlikeliest of places, he had found love, family, and a purpose. He was home. Thank you for watching. This story proves that brotherhood can be found in the most unexpected places. Did this remind you of a time someone unexpected had your back? Let us know in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe for more stories where the line between outlaw and hero gets blurred.